In a live White House broadcast, Vice President J.D. Vance revealed new information about the shocking assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. As the nation continued to mourn, Vance disclosed disturbing details about the suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, and warned about the wider implications for political violence and free speech in 2025. The studio and viewers were stunned as unexpected. Facts were laid out. The scene opened on the White House. Millions watched as Vice President J.D. Vance sat at the same desk where Charlie Kirk had previously spoken. A chyron read, "Special Memorial Broadcast, The Charlie Kirk Show, live from the White House." The country remained raw. 5 days earlier, on September 10, 2025, Charlie had been shot while addressing students in Utah. Tyler Robinson was in custody, his motives not yet fully understood. People sought answers. Vance appeared pale and solemn. "America," he began, "this isn't a normal broadcast. This is a tribute to my friend and comrade in the fight for truth." His hands trembled as he reached for notes, then set them aside. "I can't just read words. Tonight, you'll hear the truth." Behind him, a framed photo of Charlie with his wife Erica was visible beneath the studio lights. The vice president's eyes filled. "We owe him honesty. We owe him courage. We owe him everything." The studio fell quiet. Viewers braced for a revelation. Vance leaned in, voice breaking. "4 days ago, on September 11th, I went to Utah. I stood with Erica, Charlie's parents, his sister. I escorted his remains from Utah to Arizona. I held his wife as she wept." He described Erica's shaking hands as she hugged him. She said, "He loved you so much, J.D." I told her, "No, he loved you more. You made him the happiest man alive." The moment was raw. Many in the room were visibly moved. He wiped his eyes. Charlie never raised his voice to her, not once. She said he died young, but he died a joyful husband and a proud father. Now his children will grow up without him because of political hatred. Vance continued, "The best way I can honor Charlie is not only with words, but by being the best husband and father I can be. That's how we fight this darkness." Tears were visible across the audience. Then his tone shifted. He straightened and his voice grew firmer. "But America, there are truths you need to hear tonight. Hard truths." He looked directly into the camera. "I have heard calls for unity in recent days. Unity with those who danced on my friend's grave, who posted memes celebrating his death, who harassed his family the next morning. There is no unity with evil." The crowd in the studio reacted. Vance then presented a startling claim. Polls indicate 1 in 4 young liberals believe political violence can be justified, 26%. "Do you understand what that means?" he asked. "Tyler Robinson is not an isolated case. He is the rotten fruit of a poisoned tree." The room grew colder. "Charlie's blood cries out tonight," Vance said, gripping the desk. "Before this broadcast ends, you will hear details about his killer. Details the media doesn't want you to know." A clip played of Erica Kirk standing by the casket in Arizona. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Charlie never once raised his voice at me. He loved our children more than anything." Back in the White House studio, Vance paused the clip, shaken. "That's the voice of a woman robbed of her future. The voice of children robbed of a father." He noted that while she held her children, people online laughed and called Charlie names. The audience reacted audibly. Vance pounded the desk lightly. "Do you see what we're facing? This isn't politics anymore. This is cruelty. This is hatred unleashed." He quoted Erica's words in the hospital. "I don't know how to tell the kids their daddy is gone." The studio was so quiet the air conditioning could be heard. Vance repeated that on September 11th he had entered the hospital room, seen Charlie's lifeless body, and helped lift his casket into Air Force 2. "My wife Usha held Erica's hand the whole way," he said. Speaking as a father, not only as vice president, he added, "I kissed my kids goodnight last night. Charlie can't. The best way I can honor him is to love my family the way he loved his. That is the battlefield of our time, family." Vance then argued the killing was not random. Tyler Robinson didn't simply wake up and decide to kill Charlie. He grew in a culture that cheered violence. He drank poison served by institutions that profit from division. The studio's tension increased. He steadied himself and addressed the camera with measured force. Tyler Robinson pulled the trigger, but he didn't act alone in spirit. Behind him stand networks that whisper, "It's okay, celebrate, excuse it." You've read the smears funded by billionaires and protected by media giants. They lied about Charlie in life, and they lie about him in death to justify why he's not here. Gasps came from the small audience in the White House press room. Tucker Carlson, present at the event, reacted visibly. Vance continued, "This is not just about one killer. This is about the machine that raised him, shaped him, and cheered for him." He warned, "If we do not confront this, Charlie won't be the last. I will not stand here and lie to you about that. Tonight, you will hear the truth." The lights dimmed slightly as Vance leaned toward the microphone, voice low and grave. Many ask why. Why did a 22-year-old named Tyler Robinson go to Utah Valley University on September 10th and kill a man who never harmed him? He said he had met with federal investigators and could not disclose every classified detail, but asserted Robinson was not simply a lone wolf. He was shaped by an environment in which hate is nurtured. "We've discovered troubling associations. Robinson consumed media that praised violence. He followed accounts that mocked political assassinations. He lived in a digital bubble telling him people like Charlie didn't deserve to live." Vance promised to name those responsible. "Tonight, I'm going to show you who did." The audience braced. He then turned to Tucker Carlson, who responded from the panel. "I've covered stories for decades. I've seen lies and smears, but I've never seen this level of celebration of death. Within minutes of Charlie's murder, verified accounts mocked him, calling it justice. This is not journalism. It's bloodlust dressed as opinion. Tyler Robinson drank it like water." Vance agreed and broadened the accusation beyond individuals to include networks and institutions funded by money that benefits from division. "That's why we cannot treat this as random violence," Vance insisted. This was the product of a system. "If we don't confront the system, tomorrow's Charlie could be any of us," the audience murmured. Tucker asked, "Who's behind it? Who benefits from this chaos?" Vance exhaled. "That's exactly what I intend to answer tonight." He straightened, voice firmer and more forceful. "Let me be clear," he said, tapping the desk. "There are people right now calling for unity who would have us hold hands with those who laughed when Erica Kirk wept. They would have us forgive those who harassed Charlie's family the morning after his death." The broadcast paused on that warning as the program prepared to present further details. The vice president leaned forward, eyes fierce. "There is no unity with those who cheer murder." The studio erupted. Some gasped. Others nodded silently. "There is no unity with people who spread lies about Charlie Kirk to justify his killing. There is no unity with radicals who harass families and call it free speech." The room froze. His words struck like thunder. If America wants real unity, we must first demand truth. And tonight, I will bring that truth forward, no matter how it unsettles the elites who profit from silence. The crowd sat stunned. Across the nation, viewers leaned in. Another revelation was about to come. The camera turned to Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., seated quietly beside Vance. His voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "I lost family to violence. I know what it does to the soul. When I saw Erica Kirk holding her children, it took me back to my own childhood when my father was taken from me." The room went still. Even seasoned producers wiped away tears. RFK Jr. leaned closer, his hands trembling. Charlie was a joyful fighter. He believed in faith, family, and truth. To see his name smeared while his body was still warm, it is evil. Evil in a suit, writing polished columns, smiling behind keyboards. J.D. Vance nodded, resting a hand on RFK Jr.'s shoulder. "Bobby, you've carried this pain for decades. You know better than anyone. Political violence never stops with one man. It ripples into families, into generations." RFK Jr.'s eyes shone. And tonight, America must hear what planted the seed in Tyler Robinson's mind, because only truth can stop this from repeating. The audience broke into quiet applause. The moment was raw, human, impossible to ignore. Vance cleared his throat, his tone shifting back to command. Let me share what investigators uncovered in the past 48 hours. Tyler Robinson wasn't just a troubled man. He left a digital trail, and what we found is chilling. He held up a stack of printed screenshots. On private forums, Robinson wrote things like, "One bullet can change history." He joined groups twisting Charlie's speeches into lies. He was encouraged, mocked, and fed a constant stream of hate. The camera zoomed in on the papers in his hands. Now listen to this. Hours before the assassination, Robinson posted, "Tonight he speaks, but tomorrow the voice of hate is silenced." Gasps filled the studio. Vance's voice cracked, but he continued. This was not an accident. This wasn't random madness. This was intent, shaped in a world where violence is celebrated. And the truth is, those who cheered him on share the blame. Every time they mocked Charlie, every time they excused violence, they loaded another bullet. The vice president's face hardened, his voice cutting through grief. Some think words don't matter, that online posts are harmless. But tonight I say this, words can kill. They killed my friend. He paused, the silence heavy. Charlie Kirk defended free speech, but not speech that calls for blood. There is a line, and it was crossed. He stared into the camera, as if looking into the homes of grieving Americans. Tyler Robinson will stand trial. But the larger trial is for our culture, for those who treat violence as politics. The studio leaned forward. America, Vance continued, we cannot heal by pretending both sides are the same. We cannot lie to ourselves that this was random. It wasn't. The evidence, the smears, the statistics, they all point in one direction. Unless we face it, there will be another Charlie, another father, another friend, his voice thundered. Not on my watch. Not while I live and breathe in this office. The audience erupted in applause, tears mixing with resolve. Vance turned to his right. Stephen Miller, a longtime advisor, leaned into the microphone. His face was stern, his tone sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not random. Tyler Robinson didn't act alone in his mind. He was shaped, molded, fed by institutions that thrive on division. He tapped his pen on the desk. This isn't about one angry man. This is about networks funded by wealthy donors who pay writers, influencers, and activists to poison our culture. They demonize conservatives, smear their families, and cheer when blood is spilled. Gasps rippled through the audience. Miller's voice rose. And what message does that send to someone unstable like Robinson? It whispers, you'll be a hero if you pull the trigger. That's not politics. That's terrorism. J.D. Vance nodded firmly. Stephen is right. We must stop pretending this is isolated. This is organized encouragement. The words struck hard. Families at home clutched each other, tears rising, as the truth behind Charlie's death began to feel deliberate, not accidental. Tucker Carlson, silent until now, leaned in. His voice was steady, but carried a chill. J.D., when I see Tyler Robinson, I don't just see a shooter. I see a generation abandoned, young men drowning in lies, told they're righteous if they hate. He paused, letting the silence weigh. But worse, those lies don't only come from dark corners of the internet. They come from the very institutions that shape culture, media, universities, foundations. Tucker looked into the camera, eyes blazing. If we don't call this out, we are complicit. And if the government doesn't act, the next funeral may not be an activist. It could be a congressman, a senator, or even the president. The audience stirred uneasily. J.D. Vance broke in, voice steady. That is why we're here tonight, to draw a line. Because Charlie's blood must not be spilled in vain. The mix of grief and fear electrified the air. Viewers felt it. Something larger than one man's death was being revealed. Vance leaned forward, the studio lights reflecting off his notes, his voice heavy with urgency. "There's one detail the public doesn't yet know," he began. "In Robinson's phone, investigators found small payments wired from anonymous accounts. They traced back to groups that claim to fight disinformation." Gasps filled the studio. These same groups received millions from foundations tied to liberal megadonors. Yet they funneled resources into the very spaces where Robinson was radicalized. The camera cut to stunned faces in the crowd. One woman covered her mouth. Vance's tone hardened. "I don't believe everyone involved wanted blood shed, but I do believe they didn't care if it happened. And when you don't care, when you look away, you become part of it." The words landed like thunder. The broadcast no longer felt like a tribute. It felt like history unfolding. J.D. Vance took a breath and held a folded letter. His voice trembled. "Before tonight's broadcast, I sat with Charlie's mother. She gave me this note. She asked me to read one line to America." He opened it carefully, his eyes wet. She wrote, "My son was not perfect, but he loved his country enough to die for it. Tell them, J.D., not to forget him." The studio fell silent. A few sobbed quietly. Vance looked into the camera. That is what political violence steals. It doesn't just silence a voice. It destroys families. A mother who will never see her son walk through the door. Children who will never feel their father's embrace again. He clenched the letter in his hand. "And I tell you this, if we let his death fade like any other headline, then we all share the blame of forgetting." The audience rose to its feet, clapping through tears. This was no longer about politics. It was the raw pain of a grieving family. When the noise faded, Tucker Carlson leaned forward. His voice was calm, deliberate. "J.D., what strikes me is not just what happened to Charlie, it's what it says about every American household. If someone like him, a husband, a father, a man guarded by security, can be taken in daylight, what does that mean for regular citizens?" The question lingered. J.D. Vance nodded solemnly. "It means we all live with unease. Every pastor who speaks boldly, every mother who posts online, every student who stands up in class, they feel the same risk. Speak and you might pay a price." His tone grew firmer. "But America cannot become a place where violence decides who may speak. If that day comes, freedom dies. And when freedom dies, fear becomes everyone's jailer." The audience shouted in support. Some cried out, "Amen!" At that moment, the program felt less like commentary and more like a warning carried into millions of homes. The screen then shifted to a recorded message from Erica Kirk. Her face was pale, her voice steady despite the weight of grief. "My husband Charlie loved life. He loved our kids. He loved this country. And though my heart is shattered, I will not let hatred define his story." Her lips shook, but she pressed forward. "To those celebrating his death, understand this. You did not win. You may have ended Charlie's voice, but not his mission. That lives on in me and our children, and in every person watching tonight." The audience gasped, watching tears roll down Erica's face. "All I ask is that America does not forget him, and that we make sure no family has to explain to their children again that Daddy isn't coming home." When the video ended, J.D. Vance wiped his eyes. He whispered into the mic, "That is why we fight. For Erica, for their kids, for Charlie's memory." The studio erupted with sobs and applause. It no longer felt like a broadcast. It was a national memorial. Vance's voice softened as he leaned closer to the microphone. His hand trembled with the weight of the moment. "Erica told me something that broke my heart. She said her oldest child looked at her and asked, 'Mommy, did Daddy die because he told the truth?'" The studio gasped. Some buried their faces in their hands. Vance's eyes filled with tears. How do you answer that? How do you tell a child why he'll never see his father again? He paused, gathering himself. The truth is, Charlie did die because he spoke the truth, and that should alarm every American. He let the silence hang, then added, because if truth-telling becomes dangerous, then silence becomes the only safe path. That is not freedom. That is not America. Families at home held their children closer. The pain went beyond politics. It was deeply human. Stephen Miller spoke next, his voice sharp and unyielding. We must be honest. Tyler Robinson didn't just wake up and decide to kill. He was encouraged, pushed, and told by voices in his digital world that it was noble. Vance nodded gravely. Exactly. Investigators found posts where people told Robinson, "Make history." Others promised he'd be remembered as a fighter. Imagine that! Murder cheered on with praise. The studio buzzed in shock. One man whispered, "This is evil." Vance slammed his hand on the desk. And let me be clear, words are not harmless. Words shape environments. Words create killers. Every tweet celebrating Charlie's death, every article twisting his work, it all poured fuel on the fire already burning in Robinson's mind. The audience rose in applause, not just for his words, but for his courage to speak them. Vance's tone shifted. More personal now, almost prayerful. After the funeral flight, Charlie's father pulled me aside. With tears on his face, he grabbed my arm and whispered, "Jitty, please promise me this won't be forgotten." Vance's voice broke. That plea wasn't about politics. It wasn't about votes. It was a father begging leaders not to let his son's murder fade away. And I promised him, tonight I promise every American family watching, we will not forget. We will not look away. We will not let Charlie's death be used as a talking point by those who secretly cheered it. The studio roared in applause. Many wept openly. It felt less like a show, more like a national vow. Then Vance raised a copy of The Nation magazine. His hands shook with anger and grief. This came out less than 24 hours after Charlie was shot. And do you know what it said? "He had children, as do many vile people." The audience gasped. Some shouted, "Shame!" Others covered their mouths. Vance slammed the magazine on the desk. How dare they? A father, a husband, a man still warm in his casket, and they mocked his death with lies. They twisted his words, smeared his name, and justified the bullet that killed him. He leaned into the mic. Smearing the dead is not journalism. It is violence by another name. And every donor, every editor, every foundation funding this cruelty shares the blame. The crowd stood, clapping furiously. Tears streamed down faces. Many realized for the first time how organized the cruelty had been. Stephen Miller leaned in, eyes blazing. This isn't about one magazine. It's about a culture of hate, a culture where mocking the murdered is fashionable, where celebrating assassination brings clicks and applause. He pointed at the camera. Foundations like Open Society and Ford Foundation pour millions into platforms that normalize this. They bankroll the very propaganda that convinces young men like Robinson that pulling a trigger makes them heroes. J.D. Vance nodded solemnly. Stephen is right. Robinson didn't live in isolation. He breathed this poison daily. He was told Charlie was a monster, that silencing him was noble. That's the truth we face, and if we don't call it out, we're simply waiting for the next tragedy. The studio sat in stunned quiet. This wasn't just about one killer, it was about a system. Miller's voice cracked as he finished. Charlie's death wasn't just a violent act. It was the outcome of years of teaching Americans to despise one another. The vice president raised his voice, firm and unshaken. I need to say something hard tonight. There can be no unity with those who lie about Charlie to justify his murder. There can be no unity with those who attack a grieving family the day they bury their son. There can be no unity with people who celebrate on graves while children cry for their father. The audience rose in thunderous applause. People stood with tears running down their faces, shouting, "Amen!" Vance's voice grew stronger. Unity without truth is an illusion. Healing without honesty is false. If America truly wants to heal, we must climb the mountain of truth, and that requires admitting where this violence comes from and who fuels it. He paused, lowering his tone. I will not dishonor Charlie's memory by pretending otherwise. And I will never look into Erica's eyes or into the eyes of her children and tell them their husband and father died for nothing. The studio erupted again, grief mixing with resolve. It felt less like a show and more like a covenant between a leader and his people. Vance's voice dropped to almost a whisper. 2 nights ago, I had both the honor and the heartbreak of escorting Charlie's casket on Air Force Two. We flew from Utah to Arizona. Erica sat just feet away, eyes swollen, hands shaking as she held a folded letter Charlie had written to her years earlier. The studio went silent. When we landed, I watched uniformed men carry that flag-draped casket down the steps. I prayed Erica would not collapse, but she stood, barely, because she knew Charlie would want her to remain strong. My wife Usha wrapped her arms around her, a silent reminder. You don't have to bear this alone. His voice cracked. I have stood at many solemn ceremonies, but nothing compared to watching a young widow whisper goodbye to her husband in front of their children. That moment will stay with me forever. Audience members wept openly. For them, Charlie's death no longer felt distant. It felt like a family loss. Tucker Carlson leaned in. Mr. Vice President, you prayed with the family that night, didn't you? J.D. Vance nodded. Yes. Before leaving the hangar, we formed a small circle. Erica, Charlie's parents, his sister, my wife, and myself. We held hands around the casket and prayed the Lord's Prayer, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done. His voice broke. When we said, deliver us from evil, Erica squeezed my hand so tightly I felt her grief in my bones. She whispered, Please, Lord, never let another family endure this. The cameras caught audience members bowing their heads, whispering the prayer with him. That prayer wasn't only for Charlie, Vance said firmly. It was for America. For every child in this country who deserves to live without fear of bullets or hate. Applause shook the studio. People stood wiping their faces. This moment had become a national lament. Vance inhaled deeply, then placed a thick folder on the desk. Tonight, I reveal something investigators shared with me just hours ago. The audience leaned in. Inside are screenshots, bank records, and digital trails linking Tyler Robinson not only to fringe online groups, but also to networks supported by major progressive donors. Robinson wasn't just angry, he was encouraged. He was validated by a culture that told him Charlie. Kirk was the enemy of progress. He flipped a page. 1. Transfer of funds came from an organization indirectly tied to a foundation that finances media outlets. The very same outlets that smeared Charlie after his death. Gasps filled the room. Tucker's eyes widened. Stephen Miller muttered, Unbelievable. Vance's voice thundered. I want America to hear me clearly. This was not just one young man with a gun. This was a system, greased with money, fueled by lies, built to silence truth-tellers like Charlie. And if we ignore it, more lives will be lost. The audience froze in stunned silence. Everyone sensed this was the turning point of the broadcast. Vance leaned back, the weight of grief visible. When I looked into Erica's eyes, I didn't see hatred. I didn't even see anger. I saw heartbreak mixed with courage. She told me, Jay, if Charlie's voice is silenced, then others must speak louder. The studio was still. A woman in the front row sobbed openly. Her children clung to her legs as we prayed. They didn't fully understand, but they knew Daddy wasn't coming home. And that night, I realized something. Evil wanted Charlie's voice gone. But what evil forgot is this. Truth does not die with a bullet. Truth multiplies. The crowd erupted into applause, some crying, some standing. Vance's voice rose. Charlie gave me courage. He gave America courage, and I promise you tonight, his courage will live on through us. He placed his hand on the folder. There is one last truth America must hear. The money trail doesn't stop with fringe groups. It leads to powerful foundations, tax-subsidized by American families, that fueled the culture celebrating Charlie's murder. Gasps spread through the audience. Tucker covered his mouth. RFK Jr. bowed his head. I've seen the transfers, the coordination, the fingerprints. This was bigger than one trigger. It was a machine that takes young men, fills them with hate, and convinces them killing is justice. Vance's voice shook. I will not stand by while these forces profit from blood. I will not let my friend's death be reduced to a footnote. America must decide. Will we let evil win, or will we rise and defend the truth? The studio exploded with standing applause, echoing like thunder. J.D. Vance stood, his voice trembling with conviction. Charlie Kirk died because he told the truth. But his death will not be in vain. We owe it to his children, to Erica, to every grieving family in this nation, not to stand in false unity, but in unity rooted in truth. He pointed directly into the camera. If you love Charlie, if you believe in freedom, don't sit on the sidelines. Speak up, get involved. Shine light into the darkest corners where lies are whispered. Put on the full armor of God and fight, not with violence, but with courage, honesty, and faith. The audience stood, clapping so hard the cameras shook, tears streaming. Vance added softly, Charlie once told me, the truth will outlive us all. Let's prove him right. The broadcast ended with a call to action. Friends, if this story touched you, if it made you reflect on Charlie's legacy, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below how Charlie inspired you. Your words will carry his mission forward. And if you want to go deeper, join our membership for exclusive features and help us keep Charlie's fight for truth alive. Together, let's ensure his light never goes out.